What is going on, guys? I'm Adriano, and this video is going to be about how to create a serverless Spark ETL job that removes columns from a dataset using no code with AWS Glue Studio. Now, if we take a look at the sample dataset we're working with here in AWS Athena, we can do a simple query on our dataset since the data is coming from S3. And what you can see here is we have the first name, the company, the department, gender, last name, email, department ID, and the IP address. What I'm going to be doing here is removing any personal identifiable information from my dataset here and writing it to a new dataset. So I'll be removing 4 columns from my dataset, which will be the first name, the gender, the last name, and email, and then leaving everything else. So let's head over to AWS Glue Studio to get started. Alright, so within the job sections under AWS Glue Studio here, I'm just going to go hit to create a blank graph to create my new job and hit create. Alright, so my first step, I'm going to give my job a new name. I'm going to call it customer joined de-identified. I'm going to add a new node to my canvas here. So for this new node, it's going to be the data source that I'm bringing into my job, and I'm just going to call it S3 data source. And for node type, I'm going to select S3. Now we see these 2 error signs that pop up, so we're just going to head over to data source properties tab. Now we're going to select the database and table for where our dataset is. So for that, I'm going to select the customer underscore analytics database, and for table, I'm going to select customer department joined. And we can now see the output schema, the same schema we saw in AWS Athena here. Now that looks good. Now for my next step, I'm going to add the transform that's going to remove the unnecessary columns. So I'm just going to hit that add new node button. And now for the new node type, we're just going to go over to transform. Now we have actually 2 options we can use. We can use the select fields or the drop fields transform to achieve this. So if we just check out what the select fields gives us under the transform section, by selecting the columns with this transform, it's basically only going to keep these keys that I've identified. Versus if we use the drop fields transform, what this is going to do is drop the fields that we select. I'm going to go ahead and use this transform to achieve this. So I'm just going to select the first name, the last name, the gender, and email to drop. Now, if we look at our output schema here, we now have the remaining keys that are going to continue on in our job. I want to point out, maybe you might want to use the select fields transform to do this if you perhaps have 50 to 100 columns and you only want to keep a few. And the final step here is we just have to write our data. So we're just going to go ahead and add another node. We're going to give this node a name called write to S3, and for node type under the data target, we're going to select S3. Now we're going to have to select the parent, so I'm just going to select the select field transform there. Now under the data target parameters, we're going to write this to Parquet, and for compression, I'm going to select gzip. And now we're going to have to select the S3 target, so where we want to write our new data. So I haven't created this bucket yet, so I'm just going to quickly go into S3 to create that new bucket. So within S3, I'm going to go to create folder, and now I'm just going to give it the name called customer joined de-identified and hit create folder. All right, so now we should see that new folder that we just created. So going back into Glue Studio here, I can now go to browse S3, and we can navigate to the new folder that we just created, and there it is. So I'm just going to select that and hit choose. Now that looks good. We see the output schema that we're going to get, and we see that green check mark here, and everything looks good. So if we head over to the script button, we can now see the script that has been generated from our Glue Studio job. Now at line 20 here, we can see this is the line that will create the dynamic frame from our S3 dataset. We now have that drop fields.apply, which will actually drop the fields that we've selected here. And in line 30 here, this is the function here that is writing our data. And then finally, line 31, we're just committing our job. All right, so we can head over to our job detail tab to review our job parameters. The first parameter is the name of the job that we defined earlier. We're just going to have to select the IAM role that will have read and write access to our S3 buckets. I'm going to leave it as Glue 2.0, which is the latest. The language, I'm going to leave as Python. For worker type, I'm going to select G.1x, but I'm going to only select 2 workers, which is the minimum, and my data is only 5,000 records, so I want to use the minimum amount of nodes that I can. I can leave job bookmarks as enabled. Retries, I'm going to put 0, and put a maximum timeout to be 5 minutes. All right, I'm just going to save my job here, and now we should be actually ready to run our job. So just going to hit the run button. So now it says our job is successfully started, and if we go to our Run tab, we can see that the job is currently running. So I'm just going to fast forward ahead until the job is complete. Alright, so my run status was succeeded, and it succeeded within 47 seconds, which is great. So now that my job is done, I'm just going to head over to review the results in AWS Athena here. Alright, so this was the query we ran to inspect our original data. We're just going to go over to the new query window 2 window. We need to add the table first to our AWS Glue catalog. So I went ahead to populate this query that will create that table. So I've identified the column names and that location of the data of our S3 bucket and object. And now I'm going to run the query to add the table. So if it runs successfully, you should see a new table being added, and there we go. So we now have that customer joined de-identified table being added to the AWS Glue catalog. Now we can add a new query window to query our new data. So now I'm going to do select all from customer analytics dot customer joined underscore de-identified. And now if I run the query, now you can see the results of our AWS Glue job, and as you notice, the 4 columns related to PII are now gone. So I hope this video was helpful and you now know how to remove unnecessary columns using AWS Glue Studio. Now I hope you found this video helpful, and if you want to support me, please like this video and consider subscribing to my YouTube channel so you don't miss out on my next data integration tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time.